Pat, great to have you. You can't think chips and the U.S., certainly domestic manufacturing, without thinking Intel first and foremost. You recently announced that you're starting with a $20 billion investment in foundry and really building that capability here. What do you want to hear from the Biden administration, and what do you want to say?
Well, John, first, great to be on the show. Great to be with you and the team. Great to be on the inauguration of TechCheck with you. For our discussion with the White House today and with the president, clearly we've seen the motivation on the part of the CHIP Act, and now it's time to get that funded. And so getting the funding in place, as was seen as part of the administration's Job Act proposal, we think that's a great thing to get underway because we have to start building more capacity across the world. We've become way too dependent on too small of a footprint in Asia. We need a more balanced supply chain globally. Intel is ready to step into that. I announced 2 fabs just last month in our Arizona. We're ready to put the next ones in place in the U.S. And it's just so critical that the administration, that we see Congress step forward, get this funding in place, start that acceleration of the industry, because these take years to build up. And we have to build a more diverse supply chain, leading capacity, trailing capacity, solve the auto industry shortages as rapidly as possible, but build long-term flexibility as well.
Pat, TSMC and Samsung are companies based in Asia that do have significant domestic chip fab presence here in the U.S. Is there a particular benefit that the administration should look at to having not only domestic chip manufacturing, domestic fabs, but fabs that are run by U.S. companies in particular?
We believe so. Very much the case that we want to have the R&D, the research, the ownership of the technology, not just the manufacturing by American companies on American soil. And to us, that's part of what we mean by a more balanced footprint across the world. And leadership in core technologies, in semiconductors, are foundational for every aspect of the digital lives that we're all experiencing. And everything that we've seen through COVID is we were on this path, John, of more of our lives becoming digital, and COVID just accelerated that dramatically. It isn't just manufacturing, it's control and influence on the total technologies that go behind it. And that's what we believe is essential to be considered as part of today's discussion.
Pat, help our viewers understand. I mean, everything you're saying seems like a no-brainer. More self-reliance on infrastructure, more self-reliance on chip supply. Where is the friction going to come from as the policy is formulated? What is the opposing view, if you can even think of one? Maybe it's the dollar cost?
And we do think there is, certain aspects of this that I just say it's a no-brainer, right? It underlies every industry, American competitiveness. Oh, this is so straightforward. But there's always been this view that, how much of this is industrial policy versus just letting the markets decide? Also, if they're building factories in the U.S., but the intellectual property is controlled elsewhere, is that okay? We'll just say this is the time. The U.S. used to be 20 plus years ago at 37% of global supply. Today, we're at 12% and headed to less than 10. This is like the most critical technology, and we're going to lose control of that supply chain. We must act now. We must not only flatten that, but start the rise. And I believe our moonshot should be that a third of the supply of semiconductors should be back on American soil by American companies. And we are so excited to see that response, that there's bipartisan support for this approach in the government. We also believe that needs to be the case in Europe. There needs to be a balanced supply chain, leadership technology, so critical for every aspect of our nation's leadership. And COVID has just accelerated that dramatically.